The park was always quiet in the morning. Not silent. Birds were there, and wind, and the soft sound of the fountain near the center path. But quiet in the way that made people slow down, even just a little, before the day began. Sofia walked through it every morning at 7:45. Same path, same speed, coffee in her left hand, phone in her right. She had exactly 19 minutes to get to the office, and she used every one of them. She never stopped. But she noticed things. She always did. And one of the things she noticed, somewhere around her third week of walking that path, was the old man on bench 7. He was always there before her, always in the same gray coat, even on warm days, always sitting with his hands on his knees, looking at the fountain. Not reading, not on his phone, not talking to anyone, just sitting. Sofia walked past him every morning for 6 weeks. She never said anything. He never looked up. She told herself it wasn't strange. Old people sat in parks. That was normal. But something about him stayed with her, something she couldn't name. Not yet. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. Sofia knew it was Tuesday because she had a 9 o'clock meeting she didn't want to attend, and Tuesday was the only day that felt like it started with an argument. The sky was gray, not the soft gray of early morning, the heavy kind, the kind that meant rain was already decided. She had forgotten her umbrella, again. She walked faster than usual, coffee already cold, phone showing 3 unread messages she didn't want to open. And then she saw him. George was on the bench, same coat, same position. But the rain had started. Not hard, just a thin, steady drizzle, and he wasn't moving. He didn't have an umbrella either. He didn't seem to care. Sofia slowed down. She told herself to keep walking. She had a meeting. She had cold coffee. She had 3 messages and no umbrella and no time. But she stopped. She stood 2 steps away from the bench and looked at him. His gray coat was getting darker from the rain. His hands were still on his knees. His eyes were still on the fountain. She said, "Excuse me, are you okay?" He turned slowly, like someone waking from a long thought rather than asleep. He looked at her. His eyes were light blue and very calm. He said, "I'm fine, thank you." His voice was steady, not cold, just quiet. The voice of someone who hadn't spoken yet that morning. Sofia didn't move. The rain was falling on her too now, thin and cold. She said, "It's raining." He looked up at the sky, then back at her. He almost smiled. He said, "Yes, it is." Sofia didn't know what to say next. She hadn't planned any of this. She looked at the bench, then at him, then at the space beside him. She said, "Do you mind if I sit for a minute?" He looked at her for a moment, not suspicious, just surprised. Then he moved slightly to one side, even though there was already enough space. He said, "Please." Sofia sat down. The bench was wet and cold. Her coat was getting heavy with rain. She held her coffee cup with both hands, even though it wasn't warm anymore. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then she said, "I see you here every morning." He nodded slowly. He said, "I know. You walk fast." Sofia laughed, just a small laugh, the kind that comes out before you decide to let it. She said, "I'm usually late." He said, "Are you late now?" She looked at her phone. 8:52. The meeting started in 8 minutes. She said, "Yes." He said, "I'm sorry." She said, "Don't be." And she meant it. Sofia was 12 minutes late to her meeting. She didn't explain why. She sat down, opened her laptop, and let her manager talk. But her mind was still in the park, still on the wet bench, still on those calm blue eyes. She didn't know his name yet. She realized that on her way home, walking back through the park in the late afternoon. The bench was empty. Of course it was. It was past 6. But she stopped anyway, just for a second, and looked at it. Bench 7, empty. the woods still darker in some places from the morning rain. She kept walking. The next morning, she left the house 5 minutes earlier. She told herself it was because of traffic, because of the meeting, because she needed more time in the morning. She didn't admit, not yet, that she wanted to have time to stop. George was there, same coat, same bench, same stillness. But this time, when she got close, he turned before she said anything, like he had heard her steps and recognized them. He said, "Good morning." She said, "Good morning. I didn't introduce myself yesterday. I'm Sofia." He nodded. He said, "George." She said, "Nice to meet you, George." He said, "Nice to meet you, Sofia." It was simple, ordinary, the kind of exchange that happened 100 times a day between strangers. But something about hearing him say her name made it feel less ordinary. She sat down. She didn't ask this time, she just sat, and he didn't seem surprised. She said, "Do you come here every day?" He said, "Every day." She said, "Even in winter?" He said, "Especially in winter." She looked at the fountain. The water was catching the early light, silver and slow. She said, "Why this bench?" He was quiet for a moment, not uncomfortable, just thinking. Then he said, "My wife chose it." Sofia turned to look at him. He was still watching the fountain. She said, "She liked this spot?" He said, "She said bench 7 had the best view. She was very specific about things like that." Sofia smiled. She said, "Was?" The word came out before she thought about it. She heard it land and wished she could take it back. But George didn't flinch. He said quietly, "She passed away 2 years ago, April." Sofia felt something tighten in her chest. She said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." He said, "Of course you didn't. We just met." There was no bitterness in his voice, no pain that asked for sympathy, just a fact stated clearly by someone who had learned to carry it. Sofia didn't say anything else for a moment. She looked at the fountain too. Then she said, "What was her name?" He turned to look at her then, slightly surprised maybe, that she had asked about the name and not the story. He said, "Helen." Sofia said, "That's a beautiful name." He said, "She was a beautiful person." He said it simply, without performance, and Sofia believed him completely. The fountain kept moving, the light kept changing. Neither of them spoke for a little while, and it wasn't uncomfortable at all. When she stood up to leave, she said, "I'll see you tomorrow, George." He said, "I'll be here." She believed that too. It became a routine, not a planned one, the kind that builds itself, quietly, without anyone deciding. Sofia started leaving the house at 7:35 instead of 7:45. 10 minutes, just enough. Some mornings they talked a lot. Some mornings they barely said anything at all. Both kinds felt right. George always had his hands on his knees. He always looked at the fountain first, then at her when she sat down, like the order mattered, like it was part of something. Sofia started noticing small things about him. The way he paused before answering, like every question deserved a moment of thought. The way he never asked anything personal too quickly. The way he listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually listening. She wasn't used to that. One morning she arrived and he was holding something, a photograph, small, slightly worn at the edges. He was looking at it the way people look at things they have looked at 1,000 times but still can't stop looking at. When she sat down, he didn't hide it. He held it toward her. He said, "That's Helen, and me, about 30 years ago." Sofia took it carefully, the way you hold something that belongs to someone else's life. The woman in the photo was laughing, really laughing, head slightly back, eyes almost closed. The man next to her was younger, thinner, but the eyes were the same, light blue, calm. But in the photo, they were laughing too. Sofia said, "She looks so happy." George said, "She usually was." That was the thing about Helen. She didn't wait to be happy. She just was. Sofia looked at the photo a little longer. Then she handed it back gently. She said, "How long were you married?" He said, 41 years. Sofia said, "That's a long time." He looked at the fountain. He said, "It wasn't long enough." Sofia didn't answer that. There was nothing to answer. She just sat with it, the way you sit with something true. After a moment, she said, "Do you have children?" He said, "A son, Daniel. He lives in another city. He calls every Sunday." She said, "That's good." He said, "It is. He's a good man. He worries too much about me, but that's his nature." Sofia smiled. She said, "Can't blame him." George looked at her then. Something in his expression shifted. Not much, just slightly. He said, "No, I suppose you can't." A few days later, she told him something she hadn't told many people. She didn't plan it. It came out the way honest things sometimes do, sideways, in the middle of something else. They were talking about the city, about how it had changed. George had lived there for over 40 years, and Sofia had moved there 3 years ago, alone, after a relationship that ended badly. She didn't say all of that. She just said, "I moved here after things fell apart. I thought a new city would help." George said, "Did it?" She looked at her coffee cup. She said, "I think so. I'm still not sure." He said, "That's an honest answer." She said, "I'm better at honest than at certain." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Helen was certain about everything. I used to envy that. Now I think maybe honest is better. Certain closes doors. Honest keeps them open." Sofia looked at him. She said, "Did she know you thought that?" He almost smiled. He said, "She knew most things about me, sometimes before I did." Sofia looked down at her coffee. Something about that sentence stayed with her for the rest of the day. The idea of being known like that, fully, without having to explain. She wasn't sure she had ever had that. She wasn't sure she had ever let anyone try. It was a Friday morning when George told her the real story. Not the short version, not the careful one, the real one. Sofia had noticed something different about him that day before she even sat down. He was in the same spot, same coat, same hands on his knees, but something in his posture was heavier, like he had been carrying something longer than usual and was getting tired. She sat down and didn't say anything. She had learned that with George. Sometimes the right thing was to just sit and wait. He spoke first. He said, "Helen didn't just pass away. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't peaceful. She was sick for a long time. 2 years before she died, she stopped recognizing me." Sofia went very still. He continued. He said, "Some days were better. Some days she would look at me and there was something, a flicker, just for a second. But most days I was a stranger to her. A nice stranger, maybe, but a stranger." Sofia said quietly, "I didn't know." He said, "I know you didn't. I don't tell many people. It's not easy to explain what it's like. To be next to someone every day and be invisible to them at the same time." He paused, his hands tightened slightly on his knees. He said, "I used to come here with her before she got sick, every Saturday morning. We would sit on this bench and drink coffee and not say much. We didn't need to say much. We had already said most things." Sofia was looking at the fountain. She didn't trust herself to look at him right now. She was afraid of what her face might show. George kept talking. His voice was steady, but slower than usual. He said, "When she got sick, I stopped coming. I couldn't. It felt wrong to be here without her, like I was pretending something was still normal when nothing was." He said, "I came back the week after the funeral. I don't know why. I just drove to the park and sat here. I didn't plan it. My feet just knew the way." Sofia finally looked at him. She said, "And you've been coming back every day since?" He said, "Every day, 7:20 in the morning, same time we always came together." Sofia felt something move in her chest. Not pity, something bigger than that, something closer to awe. She said, "You come here to be close to her?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the fountain for a long moment. Then he said, "I come here because this was ours, and as long as I come here, it still is. Does that make sense?" Sofia said, "Yes, it makes complete sense." And she meant it more than she had meant anything in a long time. She was almost late again. She didn't care. Walking to the office, she thought about 41 years. She thought about someone knowing you before you knew yourself. She thought about a bench by a fountain and a man who drove there every morning because his feet knew the way. She thought about her own life, the apartment she had filled with furniture but hadn't really made home, the people she kept at a careful distance because getting close felt like a risk she hadn't decided to take yet. She thought, when did I start treating love like something that needed to be safe before it could start? She didn't have an answer, but the question felt important. It felt like the beginning of something. She got to the office 8 minutes late. Her manager looked up. Sofia said, "Sorry, I was at the park." Her manager said, "Again?" Sofia sat down and opened her laptop. She said, "Yes, again." She didn't explain. She didn't need to. It was a Monday morning when the bench was empty. Sofia saw it from the path, still 20 steps away, and something in her stomach dropped before her mind had time to explain why. She stopped walking. The bench was there. The fountain was there. The birds were there. The light was the same pale morning gold it always was. But George wasn't there. She stood still for a moment, telling herself it was nothing. He had a doctor's appointment. He woke up late. He decided to stay home because it was cold. There were 100 simple reasons why a person wouldn't be somewhere. She kept walking. She went to work. She sat at her desk, but her eyes kept going to her phone. By 10 o'clock, she realized she didn't have his number. She had talked to this man almost every day for 2 months. She knew about Helen. She knew about Daniel. She knew he took his coffee without sugar, and that he had once wanted to be an architect, and that his favorite time of day was early morning because the world was quieter then. But she didn't have his number. She hadn't thought about it. She had never needed it before. He was always just there. She stared at her screen and felt something that took her a moment to name. It was fear. Not the dramatic kind, not panic, just the quiet, cold fear of realizing that someone has become important to you and you didn't notice it happening. And now you're not sure what to do with that. She thought, "Oh God, when did this happen?" She left the office at lunch. She told her manager she had an errand. She walked back to the park. The bench was still empty. She sat on it. Bench 7. She had never sat on it alone before. It felt different, wider somehow, colder. She looked at the fountain the way George always looked at it, and tried to understand what he saw there. Just water, just movement, just something that kept going. Maybe that was it. She sat there for 20 minutes. People walked past. No one stopped. No one noticed her the way she had once not noticed George. She thought about that. She took out her phone and did something she should have done weeks ago. She searched for the name Daniel, George's son, in the city directory. She didn't find anything useful. She tried 2 more searches. Nothing. She put her phone away and sat a little longer. Then she did the only thing she could think of. She took a small piece of paper from her notebook, wrote her name and her number, and tucked it under the edge of the bench. Where it met the armrest, A small gap, just enough. She knew it was a little strange. She did it anyway. She went back to work. She didn't hear anything. The next morning, she left the house at 7:15, earlier than ever. She walked fast, not because she was late, but because she needed to know. From the end of the path, she looked toward bench 7, and he was there. Same coat, same hands, same stillness. Sophia stopped walking for just a second. She felt something release in her chest. A breath she hadn't known she was holding for 24 hours. She walked over. She sat down. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "You weren't here yesterday." George said, "I wasn't feeling well. Nothing serious. My son called and he worried, so I stayed home to make him feel better." Sophia said, "I worried too." He looked at her then, a long, quiet look. He said, "I'm sorry, Sophia. I didn't think about that." She said, "You didn't have my number. I didn't have yours. I realized that yesterday and I felt..." She stopped. She wasn't sure how to finish the sentence. He waited. He was good at waiting. She said, "I felt like I had lost something, and I hadn't even lost it. You were just not there for one day." George was quiet for a moment. The fountain moved. The morning light shifted slowly. Then he said, "When Helen first got sick, I used to sit here alone sometimes, before I stopped coming. And I had the same feeling every time I stood up to leave, like I was leaving part of myself behind." He paused. He said, "I don't think that feeling means something is wrong. I think it means something is real." Sophia looked at the fountain. She said, "I left my number under the bench yesterday, just in case." George looked at her for a moment. Then he reached into the pocket of his gray coat and took out a small, folded piece of paper. He held it up. He said, "I found it this morning." Sophia laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised and warm and relieved all at once. He smiled, a full smile. Maybe the first full smile she had seen from him. It changed his whole face. 3 weeks later, Sophia changed her route to work. Not to avoid the park, the opposite. She started walking through the longer entrance, the one that passed closer to bench 7, so she could see it from further away. So she had more time with it. With him. George noticed. He said, "You come from a different direction now." She said, "Better view." He looked at her. He almost said something. Then he just nodded, like that was the right answer, and he knew it. One morning, she brought 2 coffees. She didn't announce it. She just sat down and put 1 cup next to him on the bench. He looked at it for a moment. Then he picked it up with both hands, the way she always held hers. He said, "Thank you, Sophia." She said, "You take it without sugar, right?" He said, "You remembered." She said, "I remember things." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Helen used to bring 2 coffees on Saturdays. She always said the coffee from home was better than anything from a shop. She was wrong, but I never told her." Sophia laughed softly. She said, "Why not?" He said, "Because she made it with a lot of care. That made it taste better than it was. Does that make sense?" Sophia looked at her cup. She said, "Yes, it does." They drank their coffee in silence. The fountain moved. A child ran past on the path, laughing at something Sophia couldn't see. George watched the child with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Soft, distant, full of something old. She didn't ask what he was thinking. She didn't need to. On her way home that evening, Sophia stopped at the park again. The bench was empty. It was always empty by evening, but she stopped and looked at it for a moment. The number 7, slightly faded, painted in black on the side panel. She thought about the first morning she had noticed it. 6 weeks of walking past, and then one rainy Tuesday when she stopped. Just stopped. For no reason she could have explained then, but she could explain it now. She had been lonely. Not in a loud way, in the quiet way. The way that doesn't announce itself, that just sits in the background of your days like a hum you've learned to ignore. And something about that still, silent man on the bench had reached through all her hurry and her distance and her careful walls. Not because he was extraordinary, because he was real. She stood there a moment longer. Then she took out her phone and called her mother. Her mother picked up on the second ring, surprised, happy, slightly worried the way mothers are when their children call unexpectedly. Sofia said, "Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to talk." Her mother said, "Well, I'm glad you called." Sofia sat down on a different bench, not bench 7, just a regular one nearby, and talked for 40 minutes. About nothing important, about everything. When she hung up, it was dark. The park lights had come on, soft and yellow. She looked at bench 7 one more time. She thought, "Thank you, George." She didn't say it out loud, but she thought it clearly, the way you think things that are true. The next morning, bench 7 was not empty. George was there before her, as always, same coat, same hands. But on the bench beside him, there was something new. 2 coffee cups. He had brought them today. He looked at her when she approached, and there was something quiet and certain in his expression. The expression of someone who had decided something small but real. She sat down. She took the cup. It was warm. She said, "You brought coffee today." He said, "You brought it yesterday." It seemed fair. She smiled. She looked at the fountain. He said, "Sofia, can I ask you something?" She said, "Of course." He said, "Are you happy here, in this city, in your life?" She thought about it. She didn't rush the answer. She said, "I think I'm getting there." He nodded slowly. He said, "Good. That's the right direction." They sat together in the morning light, 2 coffees between them. The fountain moving the way it always moved, steady and unhurried and completely indifferent to time. And on the side of the bench, in faded black paint, the number 7. Still there, still theirs.